Catherine, this has been one of those stories where there has been a new development, and it's become a bit of a comedy of errors, really.
It's absolutely incredible, isn't it? Because on Boxing Day, this Egyptian man who'd got British citizenship at the end of 2021 because his mother was born here while his grandmother was studying, was feted by the Prime Minister and others. They were delighted to have him back. And then within hours, these horrendous tweets emerged. The government seem to be totally blindsided, say that they are abhorrent. Questioned by journalists yesterday, they basically say that it looks like they can't deport him. The Conservatives reform are calling for this. And the government still saying yesterday that they welcome the return of a British citizen unfairly detained abroad. Now, the United Nations said that his jailing in Egypt for allegedly spreading fake news was illegal under international law, and not just this government, who said it was a key priority for them, but the previous Conservative government too, under Boris Johnson and other Conservative MPs and cabinet ministers, wanted him freed and campaigned for him to be freed. His mother went on hunger strike, and there's been all this support. But these tweets go back to 2010. And we had a guest on Good Afternoon Britain yesterday afternoon, Rab Abami from The Unheard, who'd prevented him getting a prize back in 2014 because of these comments. So these comments were widely known. So, yes, the Foreign Secretary has now launched a review and said that a complete inadequacy of due diligence arrangements and serious information failures. Well, you can say that again because it really looks like incompetence by Whitehall and by successive governments.
And Catherine, we're describing these as historic tweets, but he has actually done more on social media since the front page of Telegraph. It says, Zionists out to get me, claims extremist, because on his official Facebook account, el-Fattah has liked a Facebook post which said that Zionists were behind a campaign against him. So even if he was, as he said, he claimed he was unequivocal in his apology. I think that apology perhaps was not actually particularly unequivocal. He's then, since a day later, gone on Facebook and liked this post. He's a man who clearly struggles with social media, to put it bluntly, to limit himself there. But it's not good enough to say that it's historic anymore, because it seems to be engaging in the same sort of anti-Semitism now.
Yes, and he's also been saying, these tweets were made in the heat of the moment and online fights, and I was a much younger man. Well, he's 44 now, so when he was tweeting some of these talking about women being murdered, people having their throats slit, saying that the Brits are dogs and monkeys, talking about burning down Downing Street. He was then in his late 20s, early 30s. Now, his family are basically now saying that a witch hunt is being waged against him, that these comments being taken out of context. But as you say, he's continuing to like posts that perhaps you'd think he wouldn't. And Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, today has had a quick look at his sister's social media, and she described the way that Hamas terrorists parachuted basically into the music festival on October the 7th and the kibbutz where 1,200 innocent Israelis were massacred, as being imaginative. So you just have to wonder what people in government were doing that they didn't spot any of these very alarming tweets, and now it seems very much like we're stuck with them for now.
OK, Catherine Forster, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver, and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Well, joining us now to discuss this further is the former leader of the Conservative Party, Iain Duncan Smith. Iain, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, thinking back to 2011 and the Arab Spring, there was a lot of excitement in the West and hope that actually some of the more authoritarian governments in that area might be being overthrown. And, of course, Alaa Abd el-Fattah was part of that. What was it about him and others like him that really drew Western politicians, like yourself, to supporting him at the time?
Well, I think the reality is that there was deep distrust in the nature of the governments that were governing and still governing today. In fact, it's worth just reflecting on the reality that he was actually released by the Egyptian government, and just as he was about to leave, he was then rearrested without any particular charges. So that's what's really stirred up the original cry to let him go as per the letter. I accept that I accepted assurance from people about his background and past, that I shouldn't have done, and I've regretted that because I hadn't been involved in his case previously. But the reality, though, in all of this is what's going on in the officialdom around the government and the previous governments too. We used to do huge checks of everybody's backgrounds during the Cold War. You couldn't meet, no member of government would meet somebody without them knowing chapter and verse what they've written, what they've said, what their position was. All of that carried on successfully, particularly with regards to, of course, the Soviet Union. It seems that that whole process has been stopped or collapsed. I can't make my mind up about it, because it turns out now that these briefings are haphazard. Some of the interrogation of people's past is pretty unsystematic, and the reality is there's a question mark as to whether ministers get told anything at all. If they do, and they won't make the decision, they carry that responsibility. Whether civil servants are told and don't pass it on, it's a chaotic process. If you go to the United States at any stage and meet anybody, and I travel over there a lot to see various policymakers, your background is checked fully, totally. Everything you've written, everything you've said on social media, anything you might have protested about, whatever it happens to be, or even if you've ever been convicted of taking drugs, all of this is available to those who support staff, their ministers, etc. And so the reality is we don't seem to do that at all, which is chaotic and mad. So accepting the assurance that somebody that got British citizenship had all these checks done was the mistake, I think, that I and others made, assuming straight away that it would have been clear. I'm never going to do that again, I have to tell you. But that was what I would have assumed would have happened, and I was told it happened.
Well, you were told then specifically that this man's background had been checked. I know that when you've spoken about this on X, you said you regret signing that letter. It's the closest. Okay, but that's the closest we've come to an apology from someone who did campaign for el-Fattah's release. Obviously, you've said that civil servants should have done this checking in the Cold War. This was done more seriously. Do you want to apologise for not checking yourself instead of relying on them?
I make no question. I haven't campaigned for el-Fattah. I signed a letter because it was to do with his arrest and release and then rearrest. So I've already apologised. I don't have to make any more than that. I've said it on Twitter. I've said it time and again. I wouldn't have signed this.
I think you said, I regret it.
Yes, I do. I regret it's an apology.
That's not an apology, but I'm grateful to have the apology now.
I apologised for doing it by regretting the fact that I said I would not have signed this had I known the details. So, with respect to you, how many times do you confuse those two things together? I have apologised, okay? And that's enough as far as I'm concerned, because I wouldn't have done it. I didn't campaign for his release. I signed a letter supporting the release post his rearrest because he's a British citizen. I campaigned for Jimmy Lai all the time. I campaigned for Ryan Cornelius, who's been incarcerated for 17 years by the UAE. So I do a lot of this, trying to get British citizens who have been wrongly arrested released. I was asked to sign this letter because that was the view, that he had been rearrested without legal process. And my point is, that's why I signed it. I regret now, had I known that, I wouldn't have done, and I've made that very clear, I think. I don't know if others have done the same, but I certainly have made that very clear.
Now, Sir Iain, last night, Yvette Cooper has launched an investigation into how this situation was led to occur. And thinking about what you've just said about civil service failing to flag up some of these horrific tweets, do you think that actually that's where the failures might lie? Politicians have perhaps jumped on a bandwagon, but ministers have not been properly briefed by civil servants who absolutely should have picked up what was going on behind the scenes?
Yes, I think as far as I can make out now, there is no systematic process by which people who meet ministers from abroad or at home have their backgrounds thoroughly checked. And that means reading all of their interventions online, etc., or what they've written or said, or even been covered in the newspapers. So all of that sort of thing is what you'd really have expected. And I assumed, and we all assume, that that has been going on. It has not. It appears that it happens haphazardly. It doesn't appear that the ministers, well, they say they weren't fully briefed. Whether they were or they weren't is something that we may yet find out. But the reality is that the system behind it all is, I think, chaotic. And it says very badly about the British government that our systems are not even up to what the US does and other countries, I believe, check far more seriously than we do.
Iain Duncan Smith, you've said that you signed this letter because he was a British citizen. Some in opposition are now saying that he should have his citizenship revoked and that he should be deported. Where do you stand on that?
Well, if all the evidence piles up that he has been saying these abominable things and continuing to say them, I actually called in my Twitter for the police to investigate him on the basis that they've investigated all sorts of people for making much lesser Twitter charges, and I think a couple of people have gone to prison for it. It does seem to me reasonable the police should now investigate that very seriously, and if it turns out, as it does, it seems to be developing in front of us, that this individual has been saying stuff, not just those tweets that we've originally talked about, but other tweets too, and others around him have been continuing to support.
So only if he's found to have committed a crime would you support him being deported?
Well, I think there has to be good reason why. I support what my party is saying, that he should have his citizenship taken away from him. It seems all the evidence is pointing in that direction, and I'm very happy to. But I constantly believe in due process.
Okay.
You know, we must be certain that we know that what is behind all of this is clear, and then you can act. That we're not some other organisation or other country that jumps to things. Yes, he should have his citizenship revoked. If it turns out categorically that all of these tweets and others were his and of his origin, that would certainly be a case for his citizenship to be revoked.